He had seen Simone Carter every morning for 5 years. But the moment she walked into his party holding another man's arm, Adrian Romano realized he had never truly looked at her. The champagne glass stopped halfway to his lips. Around him, nearly 80 guests filled the Manhattan penthouse with polished laughter, soft jazz, and conversations measured in millions of dollars. Candlelight reflected against 20-foot windows overlooking the city, turning the room gold against the dark November sky. Adrian should have been listening to the real estate executive beside him. Instead, his eyes remained fixed on the elevator. Simone stood there in a deep red dress, elegant and understated, her natural curls falling softly around her shoulders. There was no tablet tucked beneath her arm, no company phone in her hand, no discreet earpiece connecting her to the staff. For once, she had entered Adrian's world without carrying responsibility for it. And beside her stood a man Adrian had never seen before. Tall, confident, dressed in a midnight blue suit. He leaned towards Simone and said something Adrian could not hear. Simone laughed. Adrian froze. He knew that laugh existed, of course. He simply could not remember ever hearing it like that. At the office, Simone smiled professionally when clients arrived early and politely when Adrian changed a schedule she had spent hours arranging. This was different. Warm. Unprotected. Real. Adrian. The executive beside him waited. You were saying? Adrian lowered his glass. Excuse me. He crossed the room before deciding why. Guests greeted him as he passed, but their words blurred beneath the music. Simone had already reached the center of the room when she noticed him approaching. For the smallest instant, surprise crossed her face. Then the familiar composure returned. Mr. Romano. There it was. The same calm voice he heard every weekday at 7 a.m. Yet tonight it sounded strangely formal. Adrian's gaze moved to her companion. Simone noticed. This is Daniel Hayes. Daniel, Adrian Romano. Daniel offered his hand. Happy birthday. Adrian shook it automatically. Thank you. Daniel looked toward Simone with easy familiarity. She deserves most of the credit. She told me she planned the whole thing. Adrian glanced around at the flowers, musicians, catering staff, lighting, guest arrangements. Simone had selected everything. He had approved everything without asking how many nights she had stayed late making it happen. She usually does, Adrian said. Simone's eyes met his. Something unreadable passed through them. Then a woman in diamonds approached and smiled at Simone. I don't believe we've met. How do you know Adrian? Adrian answered before Simone could. She's my secretary. The words came naturally. They had always been accurate. But tonight, standing beside Daniel, Simone seemed to make them sound painfully incomplete. Executive secretary, Simone corrected gently. For 5 years. Daniel looked at her with quiet pride. And she's exceptionally good at what she does. Adrian felt an unexpected irritation he could not explain. This stranger had known Simone for what, a few months? Perhaps longer. Adrian suddenly realized he had no idea. Daniel placed a glass of sparkling water into Simone's hand. No champagne, he said. I remembered. Simone smiled. You always do. Adrian looked at the glass. 5 years. Nearly 1,300 mornings together. Thousands of meetings, calls, flights, dinners, crises, reminders. He knew Simone could reorganize an impossible schedule in 10 minutes. He knew she never forgot a name. He knew she could tell when he was angry before anyone else noticed. But he did not know she disliked champagne. And as Daniel guided Simone toward the jazz quartet, Adrian remained perfectly still beneath the golden lights, confronted by an uncomfortable truth. Another man knew the woman standing beside him for 5 years better than he did. 5 years earlier, Simone Carter had entered Romano Holdings carrying a second-hand leather portfolio, a carefully printed resume, and the determination not to be intimidated by the name on the office door. Adrian had barely looked at her during the interview. He had been 32 then, already accustomed to people lowering their voices when he entered a room, and he seemed more interested in the messages appearing on his phone than the woman sitting across from him. The hours are unpredictable, he had said. I noticed. I travel frequently. Then your calendar should travel with you. That answer had finally made him look up. Simone remembered the brief surprise in his dark eyes. She was hired before lunch. Within 3 months, she understood Adrian's professional life better than executives who had known him for a decade. He hated unnecessary conversation before his first coffee. He preferred window seats on morning flights and aisle seats at night. He never scheduled anything important on December 9th because that was his mother's birthday, though he pretended the blocked calendar was coincidence. He became quieter when exhausted, not louder. And whenever he stood beside the office windows with one hand in his pocket, staring across Manhattan without speaking, Simone knew to move his next meeting back 15 minutes. Adrian never asked how she knew. He simply began expecting her to know. That expectation grew quietly until Simone became part of the architecture of his life. At 6:55 every morning, his coffee appeared on the right side of his desk. At 7 o'clock, she summarized the day in less than 3 minutes. By 7:05, problems other people had spent hours discussing were reduced to decisions Adrian could make with a sentence. Once, when a winter storm canceled nearly every flight out of LaGuardia, Simone rerouted his entire trip through Newark before Adrian even heard about the cancellation. Another time, she remembered his mother mentioning an old Broadway musical and quietly secured 2 tickets for her birthday. Adrian handed them over that evening as though he had planned the gift himself. Simone never corrected him. She told herself that being useful was enough. There were moments when she almost believed it. The morning Adrian brought her coffee after she had worked until 2 a.m. The Christmas bonus accompanied by a handwritten sentence saying, "Couldn't run this place without you." The rare afternoons when his expression softened and he asked whether she had eaten lunch. But those moments always disappeared beneath the next meeting, the next phone call, the next emergency. Adrian noticed when Simone changed a spreadsheet format because it affected his work. He noticed when she arrived 10 minutes late because his schedule depended on her. He noticed when her voice sounded strained because information came through it. But when Simone cut 6 inches from her hair, he said nothing. When she returned from a weekend in Atlanta glowing after her cousin's wedding, he never asked where she had been. When her 30th birthday passed on a Wednesday, Adrian spent 11 hours less than 20 feet from her desk and never knew. At 6:40 that evening, Daniel Hayes arrived downstairs carrying takeout from Simone's favorite Thai restaurant and a small chocolate cake. They had been friends since college, back when Simone still talked about becoming an executive instead of managing another person's life. Daniel looked around the marble lobby and smiled when she came downstairs. "Tell me your terrifying boss remembered." Simone hesitated for only a second. "He had a busy day." Daniel's smile faded. "Simone, it's fine." She said it easily because she had practiced saying it for years. Upstairs, Adrian walked past her empty desk 15 minutes later and stopped when he noticed a tiny gold ribbon near her keyboard. He picked it up, stared at it, then continued into his office. He never asked where it came from. And Simone, laughing over birthday cake with Daniel 3 blocks away, quietly began wondering how long a person could remain indispensable to someone who had never truly learned who she was. 3 weeks before Adrian's birthday, Simone stood beside his desk with a tablet in one hand and a list of 87 confirmed guests in the other, while Adrian signed documents without looking up. "The quartet is confirmed for 8, she said. "Catering arrives at 4. Security has the final guest list, and the florist needs your decision between white orchids and gardenias. You decide." "Orchids." "Fine." His pen moved across another page. Simone waited. "Anything else?" Adrian asked. "You still haven't decided whether you want me working the party." That made him glance up. "Working? Someone needs to coordinate vendors, arrivals, and the staff." Adrian leaned back in his chair. "You've coordinated enough. Let the event team handle it." Simone blinked. In 5 years, she had attended dozens of Adrian's dinners, fundraisers, and private events, but always with a phone in her hand and a schedule in her head. She had never simply attended. "So you don't need me there?" she asked. Adrian misunderstood the question completely. "Come as a guest for once." He returned his attention to the papers. "Bring someone." Simone remained still. "Bring someone. A friend. A date. Whoever you want." His tone was casual, almost distracted. "You do have a life outside this office, don't you?" Simone stared at him. For 1 second, she wondered whether he realized how strange that question sounded coming from a man who had occupied most of her waking hours for half a decade. Then Adrian's phone rang. The moment vanished. "That's all," he said, already reaching for it. Simone walked back to her desk carrying 4 words she could not stop hearing. "Bring someone." That evening, Daniel Hayes called while she was riding the subway home. "How does jazz, overpriced food, and 80 rich strangers sound?" Simone asked. Daniel laughed. like either a terrible first date or a corporate hostage situation. Adrian's birthday party. There was a pause. You're inviting me into the kingdom? Apparently, I'm allowed to have a life outside the office. Daniel caught the edge in her voice immediately. He said that, word for word. And does he know what your life looks like? Simone watched tunnel lights flicker past the window. I don't think he's ever wondered. Daniel became quiet. They had known each other since college, long before Simone learned how easily ambition could turn into service when you became too good at making someone else successful. Then come as yourself, he said. Not his secretary. Not the woman checking everyone's reservations. Just Simone. The idea felt almost rebellious. Over the next 3 weeks, Adrian barely mentioned the invitation again. Simone chose the menu, approved the lighting, rearranged the seating chart twice, and made sure his favorite bourbon was stocked behind the bar. Adrian approved invoices and assumed everything would somehow become perfect, because Simone had spent 5 years teaching him that perfection required no visible effort. On Friday afternoon, 24 hours before the party, she placed the final schedule on his desk. Adrian scanned it. You'll be here by 6? Simone shook her head. 7:30. His eyes lifted. That late? Guests arrive at 7:30. Right. He seemed genuinely confused for a moment. Simone almost smiled. Remember? I'm not working tomorrow. Adrian studied her as though the fact had only now become real. Of course. She turned toward the door. Simone. She looked back. Enjoy yourself tomorrow. His voice was unexpectedly sincere. Simone nodded. I intend to. The following evening, at exactly 7:41, the penthouse elevator doors opened. Adrian was across the room surrounded by guests when he glanced toward them. Simone stepped out beside Daniel in that deep red dress, smiling at something he had whispered. Adrian stopped listening to the conversation around him. 3 weeks earlier, he had casually told Simone to bring someone. Only now did he realize he had never imagined she actually would. For the next 20 minutes, Adrian discovered that jealousy was not dramatic. It was quiet, repetitive, and embarrassingly precise. It was noticing Daniel move a chair before Simone reached the table. It was watching him exchange her sparkling water when a server mistakenly brought champagne. It was seeing Simone lean closer when the jazz quartet began playing Misty, her face brightening before Daniel murmured, I told you they'd play something you like. Adrian stood 12 feet away speaking with a venture capitalist and heard every word. You know Errol Garner? Adrian asked before he could stop himself. Simone turned toward him. I love jazz. 3 simple words, delivered without accusation, somehow made him feel foolish. Since when? The question escaped automatically. Simone's eyebrows lifted. Since I was 13. Daniel smiled. Her father had an old record collection. She used to make me listen to it in college. Adrian looked at Simone. 5 years of airport lounges, late meetings, long drives through Manhattan traffic, and he had never once asked what music she liked. I didn't know that, he said. Simone's expression softened, but only slightly. You never asked. A server passed with hors d'oeuvres, breaking the silence. Simone reached for one, and Adrian noticed another detail. She was relaxed. At work, even during quiet moments, some part of her remained alert to his schedule. Tonight she was not watching doors, checking her phone, or anticipating what anyone needed. She was simply enjoying herself. And without the machinery of his life surrounding her, Adrian could suddenly see how much of Simone had existed beyond his attention. Later, when the quartet shifted into something faster, Daniel offered his hand. Dance. Simone laughed. Absolutely not. You promised. I promised nothing. College reunion rules. He held out his hand until she finally accepted. Adrian watched them move toward the open space near the windows. Nothing about it should have mattered. Daniel was her guest. Adrian himself had invited her to bring someone. Yet when Simone laughed again, Adrian felt an unfamiliar irritation settle beneath his composure. Your secretary cleans up beautifully, one of his guests remarked beside him. Adrian turned slowly. The man appeared unaware that anything about the comment was wrong. Her name is Simone Carter, Adrian said, and she runs half the executive operations at Romano Holdings. The guest blinked. Of course. I didn't mean I know. Adrian walked away before the apology finished. The irony followed him. 5 minutes earlier, he had introduced Simone as his secretary. Now hearing someone else reduce her to the same title bothered him. Across the room, Daniel returned with 2 glasses of sparkling water. Simone accepted hers without checking what it was. Trust, Adrian realized. Daniel knew. Simone expected him to know. That tiny exchange disturbed Adrian more than the dancing had. At 9:17, Simone stepped onto the terrace for air. Adrian waited perhaps 10 seconds before following. The November wind was cold above Manhattan, carrying the distant sounds of traffic from 40 floors below. Simone stood near the glass railing, city lights reflected in her eyes. "Enjoying your party?" she asked without turning. "Apparently less than you are." She looked at him then. "What does that mean?" Adrian placed his hands in his pockets. "How long have you known Daniel?" Simone studied him carefully. "Since college." "You've never mentioned him." A faint smile touched her face. "You've never asked about my friends." Adrian had no answer. Simone turned back toward the skyline. "Is he your boyfriend?" The question finally came out. Her head turned slowly. For the first time that evening, Adrian saw genuine surprise on her face. Then something changed in her expression. Not embarrassment. Not excitement. Recognition. "Why?" she asked quietly. Adrian's jaw tightened. "Why what?" Simone held his gaze. "Why does it matter to you?" Simone let the question remain between them while the music continued behind the terrace doors, softened by glass and distance. Adrian had spent years watching people rush to fill his silences, but Simone did not rescue him from this one. "I asked a simple question," he finally said. "No," she replied. "You asked a personal question." The distinction unsettled him. "Am I not allowed to?" Simone folded her arms against the November cold. "You're allowed to ask. I'm allowed to wonder why tonight is the first time you're interested in the answer." Adrian glanced through the glass doors. Daniel was speaking with another guest near the piano, perfectly comfortable in a room that Adrian suddenly wished he had never invited him into. "You came here with him." Simone almost laughed. "You told me to bring someone." "I remember." "Then what exactly is the problem?" Adrian looked back at her. He could negotiate contracts worth tens of millions of dollars without revealing a thought. Yet one calm question from Simone had stripped away every useful answer. "There isn't a problem." "Good." She turned toward the door. "Simone." She stopped. "Is he your boyfriend?" This time she studied him longer. "No." Relief arrived so quickly that Adrian hated himself for feeling it. Simone noticed. Of course she noticed. "Daniel and I have been friends since college," she continued. "He knows my family. He knew my father. He was there when I got my first job in New York." Adrian's expression changed at one word. "Knew." Simone became still. "My father died 7 years ago." Adrian said nothing. 5 years. She had worked beside him for 5 years, and he had not known her father was dead. He remembered asking Simone to arrange flowers for associates he barely knew. He remembered her reminding him about anniversaries, birthdays, hospital visits, condolences. She had carried the details of everyone important to him, while he had never learned the simplest grief in her life. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Simone nodded. "Thank you." There was no cruelty in her response. That somehow made his ignorance heavier. The terrace door opened, and Daniel stepped outside holding Simone's coat. "You left this inside." "Thanks." He placed it across her shoulders with the easy familiarity of someone who had done small things for her many times before. "Everything okay?" Daniel asked. Simone looked at Adrian before answering. "Everything's fine." Adrian heard the same phrase she had probably used hundreds of times at work. Only now he understood it did not necessarily mean what he had assumed. Daniel returned inside, leaving them alone again. "He knows you well," Adrian said. "Yes. Better than I do." Simone's eyes held his. "That isn't Daniel's fault." The words were gentle and devastatingly accurate. Adrian looked toward the city. 5 years. 5 years, she repeated. "I know what coffee you drink. I know which hotel rooms you prefer. I know your mother hates lilies and that you pretend not to care about your birthday. I know when you need silence and when you need someone to tell you the truth." Adrian turned toward her. Simone's voice remained steady. "Do you know what I wanted to be before I became your secretary?" He searched his memory and found nothing. "No." "Do you know why I stayed 5 years?" Again, nothing. Simone gave a small, sad smile. "That's the difference between knowing someone and knowing how useful they are." Before Adrian could respond, Daniel appeared behind the glass and pointed toward his watch. Simone nodded. "We have another place to be." Adrian frowned. "Tonight?" "Yes." "Where?" Simone reached for the door, then paused. "That's another personal question." For the first time, there was warmth in her smile, but also distance. Good night, Adrian. He watched her walk back into the party beside Daniel. 10 minutes later, the elevator doors closed behind them. Adrian remained near the windows, staring at the empty space they had left behind. He had spent the entire evening worrying that Daniel wanted Simone. It had never occurred to him that Daniel might be offering her something far more dangerous to Adrian than romance, a future that no longer included Romano Holdings. The elevator doors had barely closed before Adrian realized the party no longer interested him. Behind him, glasses chimed. The quartet moved into another song, and conversations resumed beneath the warm chandelier light. But the penthouse suddenly felt like a room he was observing from somewhere far away. He checked his watch. 10:26 p.m. Another place to be. Simone's words repeated in his mind. He had almost asked where again, then stopped himself. She had made the boundary clear. Her life outside Romano Holdings was not another schedule he was entitled to inspect. You look distracted. Adrian turned to find his longtime advisor, Marcus Bell, holding a glass of sparkling water. I'm fine. Marcus smiled faintly. That answer usually means you're not. Adrian ignored him and looked toward the elevator. How much do you know about Simone? Marcus raised an eyebrow. You're Simone. She isn't my Simone. The correction came too quickly. Marcus noticed. What exactly are you asking? Adrian considered the question. A few hours earlier, he might have asked whether Daniel was trustworthy, where they had gone, how long they had known each other. Now those questions felt embarrassingly small. What did she do before she worked for me? Marcus thought for a moment. Business degree. Operations work. She interviewed for management positions before taking your office job. Adrian looked at him. Management? You didn't know? The silence answered for him. Marcus lowered his glass. Adrian, Simone was never supposed to remain an executive secretary forever. Meanwhile, 3 miles downtown, Simone and Daniel entered a quiet restaurant in Soho where a corner table had been reserved beneath warm pendant lights. A slim folder waited beside Daniel's plate. Simone saw it inside. You brought paperwork to dinner? I brought your future to dinner. That sounds dramatic. I learned from you. Daniel pushed the folder toward her. On the first page were 4 words that made Simone stop smiling. Chief Operating Officer. Daniel had spent 2 years building BrightPath, an education technology company connecting low-income high school students with scholarship programs, mentors, and college resources. Simone had advised him informally from the beginning, usually late at night after finishing Adrian's work. Now BrightPath had secured major funding and needed someone to run operations. Daniel, before you say no, read the number. Simone did. The salary was substantial, but that was not what held her attention. Equity. Decision-making authority. A team of her own. You're serious. Completely. Daniel leaned forward. You've spent 5 years making someone else's organization work better. I'm asking what happens if you finally build something with your own name attached to the decisions. Simone looked down at the offer. For years, leaving Romano Holdings had existed as an abstract possibility, something safely postponed until next quarter, next year, someday. Now someday had a salary, a title, and a start date. Monday morning arrived beneath gray Manhattan skies. At 6:55, Simone placed Adrian's coffee on the right side of his desk, as she always did. At 7 o'clock, she entered his office with the morning schedule. Everything looked normal. That was what frightened Adrian. Your 9 o'clock moved to 10, she said. The Boston call is confirmed, and your mother's driver will arrive at 2:30. Adrian barely heard her. A cream-colored folder was tucked beneath Simone's tablet. Not company stationery. What's that? He asked. Simone followed his gaze. For 1 second, neither moved. Then she placed the folder on his desk. Adrian saw the BrightPath logo in the corner. Daniel's company, Simone said. His expression became unreadable. What about it? She took one measured breath. He offered me a job. The office went completely still. Adrian looked at the folder, then at the woman who had organized every working day of his life for 5 years. And Simone met his eyes. And I'm thinking of taking it. Adrian looked at Simone as though she had spoken in a language he understood perfectly but refused to accept. The BrightPath folder rested between them, cream paper against dark mahogany, harmless in appearance and somehow capable of changing every morning he had taken for granted. Chief Operating Officer, he read. Simone nodded. That's the position. You've already discussed terms? Saturday night. Another place to be. Adrian finally understood where she and Daniel had gone after the party. The realization should have relieved the jealousy that had followed him all weekend. Instead, something heavier replaced it. Daniel was not trying to take Simone from him romantically. He was offering her the professional future Adrian had never thought to ask whether she wanted. "What are they paying you?" Adrian asked. Simone's expression changed immediately. "That's your first question? I can beat the offer. You haven't even read it." "I don't need to." Adrian stood and walked around the desk. "Whatever the salary is, I'll increase it by 25%. We can change your title. Executive Director. Vice President. If you want equity, we can discuss that too." Simone remained silent. Adrian mistook the silence for consideration. "You should have told me you wanted advancement. That did it." Simone slowly placed her tablet on the desk. "I should have told you." Adrian heard the shift in her voice. "That isn't what I meant. For 5 years, you watched me perform work beyond my title. I negotiated vendor contracts, coordinated executive teams, managed international schedules, solved problems senior managers brought directly to me because they knew I could handle them. Which is exactly why I'm willing to now." One word stopped him. Simone's eyes remained steady. "You're willing now." The office became painfully quiet. Beyond the windows, morning traffic moved along Park Avenue hundreds of feet below, indifferent to the fact that Adrian Romano had suddenly discovered money could not solve the problem in front of him. "What changed?" Simone asked. "Nothing changed." "Something did." She stepped closer to the desk. "Daniel walked into your penthouse beside me. He remembered what I drink. He knew what music I love. Then you discovered he believed I could run a company. And suddenly, I'm worth a new title, more money, equity." Adrian's jaw tightened. "That isn't fair, isn't it? I've valued you for years." Simone's expression softened with something closer to sadness than anger. "You valued what I did for you." Adrian started to answer, then stopped. "There's a difference," she continued. "You knew I was reliable because reliability made your life easier. You knew I was organized because organization protected your time. You knew I was intelligent because my intelligence solved your problems. But Adrian, until Saturday night, you didn't know I loved jazz. You didn't know my father died. You didn't know Daniel existed. You didn't know I wanted to run operations someday." Each sentence removed another defense. Adrian looked at the coffee beside his hand. "Black." "Exactly right." Simone had remembered his preference that morning even while considering leaving him. He could not remember how she took hers. "Why did you stay?" he asked quietly. Simone's eyes flickered. It was the question he should have asked years earlier. "Because this job mattered to me," she said. "Because I respected you. Because somewhere along the way, being the person you depended on started feeling dangerously close to being the person you cared about." Adrian became perfectly still. Simone picked up the Bright Path folder. "But those aren't the same thing." She turned toward the door. "Have you decided?" he asked. Simone stopped with her hand near the frame. "Not yet." Adrian looked at her, stripped of every easy solution. "What would make you stay?" Simone glanced back. Her answer came softly. "If I have to tell you, then you still haven't understood why I'm leaving." For the rest of Monday, Adrian did something Simone had rarely seen him do. He stopped trying to win. No revised offer appeared on her desk. No executive title arrived by email. No message from Human Resources asked her to reconsider. At 5:42 p.m., Simone was shutting down her computer when Adrian stepped out of his office carrying his own coat. "Good night, Simone." She looked up, almost suspicious of how ordinary the words sounded. "Good night." He walked toward the elevator, then stopped. "And take tomorrow morning off." Simone frowned. "You have the Whitmore meeting at 9. "I know. And the Boston numbers need to be reviewed before." "I know those too." Adrian gave her a faint smile. "I'm capable of surviving one morning without you." Simone stared at him. "That remains to be seen." For the first time in days, Adrian laughed. "Fair enough." The elevator doors closed behind him. The next morning, Simone woke at 6:12 out of habit and reached for her phone before remembering she had nowhere to be. She made coffee exactly the way she liked it, with cinnamon and a little cream, then sat beside her apartment window watching Brooklyn wake beneath a pale winter sky. At 9:03, her phone remained silent. At 10:17, still nothing. Adrian had meant what he said. Back at Romano Holdings, his morning was imperfect. He poured his own coffee too strong. He spent 7 minutes locating a report Simone could have found in 10 seconds. He accidentally scheduled 2 calls too close together and ate lunch 20 minutes late. Nothing collapsed. That realization mattered. Simone had made his life easier, but she had never existed merely to make it easier. By Wednesday afternoon, she had made her decision. She entered Adrian's office carrying the Bright Path folder and a single-page letter. Adrian saw the paper and understood before she spoke. "You're accepting it?" "Yes." He lowered his eyes for a moment. "When do they want you?" 3 weeks. Adrian nodded. "Then we'll make the transition clean." Simone had prepared herself for disappointment, persuasion, perhaps another offer. Instead, Adrian opened his calendar. "Choose whoever you want to train as your replacement. You'll have final approval." She blinked. "You're giving me final approval? You know the position better than I do." A small silence followed. "Thank you." Adrian looked at the resignation letter, but did not touch it. "I owe you something before this becomes official." Simone waited. "I was wrong." His voice was calm, without performance. "I noticed your value when I thought someone else might take your attention away from me. Then I tried to keep you by offering more of the same things that had already made you feel invisible." Simone's expression softened. Adrian continued. "You shouldn't have needed another man to walk into my home before I wondered who you were outside my office." The honesty surprised them both. "Daniel didn't make me valuable," Simone said. "I know. And leaving doesn't mean these 5 years meant nothing. I know that too." Adrian finally picked up the resignation letter. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you." Simone's eyes lowered briefly. Those words reached somewhere money never could. "Thank you, Adrian." 3 weeks later, on her final Friday, Simone cleared the last drawer of her desk. At 5 o'clock, employees gathered with cake, flowers, and handwritten cards. Adrian remained near the back, allowing the moment to belong to her. When everyone left, Simone found a small box beside her keyboard. Inside was an original vinyl pressing of Misty, the jazz record her father had loved. No expensive jewelry, no grand gesture, just one handwritten card. "I finally listened." Simone looked through the glass wall toward Adrian's office. He was not watching for her reaction. For once, he had done something kind without expecting anything in return. She held the record against her chest, smiled quietly, and understood that leaving had taught Adrian what staying never could. 6 months later, Simone stood beneath the vaulted ceiling of the New York Public Library and listened as Daniel announced that Bright Path had reached 50,000 students nationwide. Applause filled the marble hall. Simone smiled from beside the stage, no tablet in her hand, no schedule hidden behind her back, no one else's priorities waiting in her pocket. Her name appeared on the program beneath a title she had once been afraid to imagine for herself: Chief Operating Officer. She had spent half a year building teams, making decisions, traveling to schools, and discovering that leadership felt different when her voice was not simply carrying someone else's instructions. Daniel found her after the presentation. "You realize half these donors came because of you." Simone shook her head. "They came because the program works." Still refusing compliments. Still exaggerating them. Daniel laughed and moved toward another group. Simone turned toward the tall windows, where evening lights glowed along Fifth Avenue. That was when she saw Adrian. He stood near the entrance in a charcoal suit, speaking with an elderly board member. No assistant hovered beside him. No phone occupied his attention. When the woman spoke, Adrian listened. Completely. Simone watched longer than she intended. Something about him had changed, though it was difficult to name. He seemed less interested in controlling the room and more willing to exist inside it. Adrian eventually looked across the hall and saw her. He did not immediately approach. He simply smiled. Then he waited. The choice was hers. Simone crossed the marble floor. "Mr. Romano." Adrian's eyebrow lifted. "We're back to that. I wanted to see your reaction." "Cruel." She laughed, and this time Adrian smiled because he finally recognized the sound. "Congratulations," he said. 50,000 students is impressive. You've been following Bright Path? The foundation became a donor 3 months ago." Simone stared at him. "Daniel never told me. I asked him not to." "Why?" Adrian glanced toward the stage. "Because supporting something you care about shouldn't require you to know I did it." Simone became quiet. Months earlier, he would have made sure she knew. He would have turned generosity into evidence. Now he expected nothing. "How's the office?" she asked. "Functional." "That sounds ominous." "My new executive assistant drinks tea, refuses to answer emails after 7, and informed me on her second day that my calendar was unreasonable." Simone smiled. "I like her already." So do I. Adrian hesitated. She also has a development plan. Apparently, executive assistants are allowed to have career goals. Simone looked at him carefully. You learned something. Several things. Most of them embarrassingly late. A soft jazz arrangement began near the staircase. Simone recognized Misty within the first few notes. Adrian did too. Their eyes met. I still have the record, she said. I hoped you would. Silence settled between them, comfortable rather than unfinished. Adrian could have told her he missed her. He could have explained that seeing her with Daniel had forced him to confront feelings he had ignored for years. But he understood now that Simone's new life was not an empty space waiting for him to enter. So he asked the only question that mattered. Are you happy? Simone looked around the hall, at Daniel speaking with students, at the Bright Path banner, at the future she had chosen for herself. Very. Adrian nodded. Good. He began to step away. Adrian. He turned. Simone smiled. Do you still drink terrible black coffee? Every morning. Then maybe I should introduce you to better coffee sometime. Adrian's expression softened, but he did not assume anything more than she had offered. I'd like that. Simone nodded toward him. Saturday. 11. Brooklyn. I'll be there. Don't bring an assistant. I've learned. Simone laughed again as Adrian walked away. 6 months earlier, another man had made him notice her. But noticing had never been enough. Adrian had needed to learn something harder. Simone was not valuable because he wanted her, needed her, or feared losing her. She had always been valuable. He had simply learned, at last, how to see her.